Welcome to Darshan Talks, powered by the Kulkarni law firm. This podcast explores the challenges and opportunities facing FDA-regulated companies. Join us as we discuss the latest trends, news, and insights with experts and executives in the field.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm here with the perennial favorite, Dave Bulger, and Dave's been on and has been rocking that plaid for the whole time, so I'm excited to have him on. I'm excited for him to tell us about AI. I'm excited for him to tell us if we have AI or if we're just in a super smart chatbot world. And is there a difference? And we're going to tie it all to pharma. We're going to tie it all to things that are developing right now. Everything from Elon Musk saying that the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket because of AI to the world. I saw this other article. We've all been shouting about how AI is going to displace employees, except I saw an article yesterday saying we're looking to hire someone for $300,000 because we need you to be able to ask good questions to the AI, not just a Google type question. So It's resulting in new jobs already, which is interesting to me. So Dave, before we get started, I'll let you introduce yourself, tell people about who you are, why you are the person that matters, and why we should all be in complete awe of being in your presence.
Wow. So low bar. So I'm Dave Bulger, founder and chief operating officer of Tuzag Inc. And we build conversational AI-based platforms for creating digital ambassadors in the healthcare space. My background is in artificial intelligence, behavioral science, and I went to film school. So
that's a natural fit, right? Film school.
Yeah, well, if you think about conversational AI, it's really about storytelling, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, and this is what freaks everybody out. Everybody wants the current instantiation of conversational AI to be, data from Star Trek. And we talked about this before, right? But we're not there. It's really just a tool. Like the hard part of any communications platform is the content. And where the hope you see in all the boards and sort of the pundits are all, oh, well, this is going to replace the copywriter. Pretty much any writer you look at begs to differ, right? And so what I have found personally, we started playing with ChatGPT-3. We're doing a prototype of a digital concierge for a health plan. And, I was looking at, how can I use GPT-3 to accelerate my content writing? Right. And so if you think of it, and the benefit is most of what we were doing, I have subject matter expertise in. So I knew whether the content being returned was any good. And I did find that it facilitated my writing process greatly. But, to what we were talking about before we came on, this is a tool for accomplishing things, not a standalone widget you just plug in and let it go. Right. And that's, I think, going to be the part that hurts the heads of people trying to invest in this space.
I find this to be a really interesting problem we face consistently over time. Yeah. I'm thinking of the fact that inevitably, if need is the mother of invention, we'll end up in a scenario where, for example, right now we're going, we need more content. That's the only way we can drive people to us.
Yes.
Well, we need more copywriters. Well, copywriters are expensive. There are too few of them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we now have a quote unquote virtual copywriter, ChatGPT-3, a Bard, that can do it maybe 60, 70, 80% as good. And the question is that good enough? And I think that's the question that I think a lot of people are asking. I can see this not just in, it's kind of the latest iteration of a problem we've had before. And I'll give you an example of it. In healthcare, we've always talked about this idea that there are too few doctors. So we said we're going to have PAs and NPs. They're not going to be as comprehensive as doctors, but they will address the shortfall. And we got to a place where we said they do a pretty decent job. They cover 70-80% of what we need. But that remaining crucial 20%, we should still keep that to doctors. Except we slowly said we don't. There are loads of states where NPs are allowed to practice independently. So the question we start facing is, are we in a place where, yes, right now we say, copywriters, your job is secure. Lawyers, your job is secure. Doctors, your job is secure. Until such point as you get to a place where you go, yeah, it's secure, but we're going to let this thing run free anyways.
Yeah, so yes and no, right? So here's the basic problem. Go talk to ChatGPT-4 or Bard and ask them to source the information they just gave you.
Oh, I've done that. It's hilarious because it makes up its own links.
Oh, exactly. And so the short answer to your question, if I was running a pharma brand, would I allow assuming I've still got an agency? It's been a while since I've been in pharma. The brands used to outsource this to the agency. I don't know if they brought it in-house or not, but whoever that poor content team is, right? Like you can't review the content if you just, made an API call to ChatGPT, to any of the generative AI. We'll just say that, right?
Yeah.
Which is also, I think, probably a good distinction to make generally. We started talking about this as conversational AI, and it's not. It's generative.
What's the difference?
Right? So generative AI is we're going out and scraping a set, right? So the large language models, are basically going out and looking at the internet, right? So I think ChatGPT-4 is looking at a 2020 or 2021 snapshot of the web. Bard's doing it a little closer to real time, but they're out there looking at everything that got stuck into the model and returning something. So, the issue with that is you got no control over what's getting returned. So I can't with any precision. So, I have to, if I'm sending out a behavioral support program for my brand, I don't get to just put that in the mail and go like that. I got to call somebody like you. You got to read the content. I got to get medical subject matter experts to bless it, right? Because the ramifications of putting a wrong word out there is massive, right? And I've been through this a lot in the pharmaceutical industry, in fairness, mostly in the 90s. When we were first getting our head around the web, when we were first getting our head around tailored communication, right? So individually tailored messaging, how do you review it, right? And so that was the bulk of our research at University of North Carolina, late 80s, early 90s, was can we accelerate behavior change by not just segmenting messaging, writing variations based on personas, right? But can we reach the individual and tailor communication on the fly to adapt to the readers, at the time this was all print, to adapt to the readers, changing needs and behavioral expectations and outcomes. And so, in order to get that through FDA review and through medical and legal review, we had to basically, first we had to convince, the FDA that they didn't need to see every permutation, because we would have shipped them, trillions of permutations, right? And so we figured out, well, if we can allow everyone to review a knowledge base that includes both the content and the times when that content would be presented to a customer, then we can clear all of the gates and put things in market, right? So
can I ask you a question about that? Because this is a question people are trying to answer right now.
Yeah.
You what you're saying is you solved this problem in the 1990s, and the FDA's been more comfortable ever since, assuming there is some institutional memory that goes along with it. However, this issue gets raised in every conversation I've ever had. Well, a lot of conversations. Point being, how did you get the FDA to say, yes, we don't need every permutation and combination because yes, I recognize there's a volume issue, but how do I know that the overall permutation and combination will end up being acceptable?
So our methodology, and we still use this at 2ZAG, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Our methodology was, here is basically, think of a Microsoft Word table. This is, here's all the content snippets, here's the usage rules, here's what data we're using to determine whether or not this piece of content goes. And then we would build, we generally built between 25 and 50 use cases, where we would provide the reviewer with, here is the data profile for the use case. Here are the materials that they would get if they interacted. But the important part of it was they could start to see how the little sentence fragments fit together, so that if none of the fragments were violating anything, the concatenation of those, the combining of the sentence fragments into a complete sentence, would also not say a wrong thing, right? And we would gear the finished use case, the prototype cases, if you will, we would gear those towards allowing the reviewer to see complex content in context.
What I hear you saying, however, is
sure,
you had an algorithmic solution to the problem. AI doesn't have that. AI still has a black box problem, because you don't know exactly what inputs it's considering. You don't know what machinations, is that the right word? Machinations, the system is going through. And therefore, you don't know why the output it put out was. And I'll give you an example. I'd consider myself a little bit of a subject matter expert in promotional review stuff, clinical trial stuff, that area. And I asked it to come up with something. And I said, give me examples of, I think I was looking at, give me examples of kickback concerns that OIG pointed out in the last 2 years. It spit something back out at me. And some of them were like, those are really cool cases. I had no idea this was there. So I clicked on it. Turns out this thing doesn't exist. It just literally made up an entire case. And I thought this is brilliant. In terms of going, I wish I had that content because I could use that for educational purposes.
Sure.
But it shows that it'll literally make up stuff in some cases. So you solved a different problem than AI is facing right now. Is that correct?
Well, we solved it because we couldn't face it, right? So our customer needed to have signatures before they could send anything out.
Right.
And in order to get those signatures, we had to prove to the we'll call them regulators just as a group, right?
Yeah.
We had to prove to the regulators that the computer wasn't going to generate a message that was out of bounds.
Yeah.
And so that becomes the central crux here, is you've got to make, it's all a liability issue, right? So you can't have black boxes, right? So at runtime, so we've sort of the best of both worlds, right? At runtime, we're using, natural language processing to determine what the user is saying, convert that into some sort of key value pair that allows us to process that information. Then we use machine learning to go back and figure out, all right, based on what we've heard and what we know of the user up to now, what are the true rules for the next message? We find all the true rules, we figure out what the sentence fragments are for those, we concatenate those and pass them back to the presentation layer. In order for any regulator to let that happen, they have to be absolutely confident. So the opposite of black box, it's a white box, right? It's like, you got to be able to see all of the things that the computer might say and believe that based on the algorithmic, this is classic expert system stuff, right? So based on the inferences that the engine is making, it is pulling the right content from the knowledge base at the right time. So I don't have to worry about what the computer is going to say in a given interaction, because we've already blessed every possible thing that the computer could say, right?
I'm going to challenge you on that, because it reminds me, well, it's too late to challenge you on the past of it, but I'm talking about the future version of this.
My beard, so I'm put back in the Wayback Machine.
So what you're talking about in many ways is what people are talking about right now around modular content. And this idea that if I take piece A and I take piece B, and you've blessed piece A and you've blessed piece B, therefore the combination of A and B are also blessed.
Yes.
And theoretically that works,
Yes.
except the moment you add context. Now, in your case, you had controlled context.
Yes.
But in the PRC world, for example, A plus B is not necessarily equal to A plus B. A plus B could be equal to C in a specific set of circumstances and D in a second set of circumstances. And without defining those circumstances, it's impossible to say we bless every permutation and combination.
Yep.
Is that fair?
It's absolutely a fair theoretical construct.
Okay.
In practice, because we're dealing with actual language and actual, we'll go back to think of Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Sure.
The notion of this from a D&D standpoint is a good dungeon master creates a world and ensures that the player characters are moving through that world while making sure that all the constraints are there. That's the model we use for designing the sort of the neural net topology for the knowledge base. Is I can with almost absolute certainty know that there's no combination of sentence fragments that would go out of bounds, right?
Yes.
It's a planning thing. And that's where now I can get you on board with that. I can walk you through that. You can comfortably approve that, right? Why? Because you've seen all the ingredients to the souffle, right?
Yeah.
So now the difference is, do you want a bot doing it or do you want Julia Child making your souffle?
I'm going to challenge you on that. That's not exactly true.
Sure.
I think you take that exact same souffle and make it in Ocean City, Maryland.
Sure.
And you take that same souffle and go to Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
You're going to get a very different dish.
Well, you're going to augment the usage of the ingredients, and you're at high altitude in Machu Picchu. So,
exactly.
you got to keep it from falling. So you've got to change the way your oven's, sorry, I'm cooked.
And that's exactly my point, though. That's exactly what I was suggesting. The conditions change. And to the point you were making a few seconds ago, they are. And I think that's the point. The question is, when you're designing an AI system
for
modular content, can you convince your MLR or your PRC committee that we have control of the moving parts, the parts that we know every permutation of events that can come through.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is by either getting sign-offs from people saying I am a healthcare professional. So automatically you can open up the world of questions you can answer. Or say that this information may not be accurate, but I'm not sure a disclaimer is going to be sufficient in those situations. On the other hand, if you are coming into the patient world and you're talking about a sales rep doing this, then you are going to stick to the label. You're not going to go down the off-label route.
Sure.
The problem you start facing is what happens if you've got the off-label information. Sorry, you've got the on-label information. Patient comes in and says, I have this problem. Is the AI smart enough to know I don't know the answer? Mm-hmm. And can you guarantee that the AI will say, let me direct you to someone else? And
we build that in all the time. Like the best use case that we always talk about is we're always listening for cues to harm to self or others, right? I never want one of our digital concierges dealing with that. Right. We can ask some probing questions, right? You could start with, a couple of the PHQ-9 questions, but at some point you go, you know what? I think you should talk to one of my human friends. And we always set up the warm transfer, right? So, but if we don't know, that's what we try to build digital concierges that have personalities. So that just like you and I are talking and I say something and you say something back and I go, I don't know what you just said.
Right.
And so then you refer me to some place to go learn, right?
Yeah.
So in this situation, if you think about it, well, again, use this from a brand perspective, right?
Yeah.
So say we've constructed a digital concierge that is walking you through treatment adherence for a particular brand. And you ask in the course of that, can I use it on my dog?
Right. There you go. That's a great one.
Right.
Yeah.
So it works for me. I mean, my dog has, arthritis. I'll just use my Humira on my dog. No, please don't.
Just to be clear, we're not recommending that that's something you do.
Exactly. Exactly. And so the digital concierge needs to say, I don't have anything that says you should be doing that. If you're really intent on doing that, would you like me to transfer you to a product specialist?
Yeah.
Who would, or your doctor? It's like, or in the case we just used, would you like to talk to the specialty pharmacy and see how much they're going to charge you to stick that in your dog? So the notion is you're building the concierge, the conversational AI has bounds.
Yeah.
And as soon as something starts to hit the boundaries, you either redirect inside the bounds. Remember the Truman Show, right? As soon as Truman started getting close to the wall, there was always a character that would come in and lead him the other way till he rams the boat into the side, right? So for anyone who hasn't watched Truman Show, sorry, spoilers. But
I think we can do 30-year spoilers. I think that's fair game.
I would hope so. Darth Vader was Luke's dad. Ooh. Anyway, but that's the thing, right? Is we have two outs. One is to use the Truman Show methodology. We have to keep Truman away from the walls.
Yeah.
Right. So you start to get near a wall. We're going to guide you back conversationally into a safe space. If you have an out of bounds query or something that's outside the world, it's time to call Ed Harris in, and he talks from God, moves the thing around. But that's where not trying to do these things in a vacuum is super important. And I'm really worried about the industry. I mean, because fintech's kind of had this problem where you can get awfully irritated with a chatbot on your banking site because you can never get to a human.
Yeah.
Instead, they just put you in these endless loops and you get mad, and now it's a bad customer experience. And I get really afraid that healthcare, because that approach is easier, I'm basically just going to build a tree, a decision tree, and walk you through the tree. And she's only going to say, the concierge only can say 10 things. Right. Well, that's a bad user experience. And I am hopeful that pharma says, look, what we're going to do is we're going to embody a digital assistant, conversational AI, to manage the patient for anything below the license of our human reps, right? So do they know all the nuances that the doctor's going to know? No. Are they basically a very useful interpretation of all of the messaging that's been approved? Yes. But you can't just set these things off and let them go. It needs to be part of a healthy breakfast, right? So I've got my bot, and I've got my call center, and I've got my subject matter experts, right? So, and my medical experts, and I need to be able to say, okay, this is what the customer journey looks like. Customer journey is going to talk to the conversational AI up to the point where the conversational AI needs to hand this off. 9 contacts out of 10, you'll never need to talk to a human. So now my humans have scaled. Have I replaced any humans? No. I have taken my licensed humans and allowed them to serve more people because they're taking less time, basically reading the box to people. Because the concierge can handle that.
So I'm going to respond to that with 2 different pieces. The first is, have we replaced humans? And you said, no, we've just sort of enabled them to scale a little bit more. The problem is when you scale humans, by definition, you're replacing humans, because what you would have scaled with 10 people, now you're scaling with 1, which means that you got rid of 9 people. So you do have to worry about that problem. One might argue, well, it's better customer service, which you're probably right. But the fact is that, knowing how businesses are, they will still cut back to the bare minimum. Because it's just cheaper that way. That's the exact reason you put in the system, to cut
Yeah.
back costs. And anyone who,
you enhance revenue, right? So the other, say I have 10 CSRs, I
Yeah.
don't need to fire 9. I can now handle 10 times the
volume.
volume. So I like to think of this as a revenue enhancer, not an expense mitigator.
I'm going to challenge you on that, though, because
Sure.
if you're saying that it's a revenue enhancer, it means that you are then disserving those remaining 9 individuals the entire time, which I find is likely quite possible, quite honestly. But it's a problem, because that means that before you scaled, you were in a place where you did not do a good job for these customers anyways.
Yes.
Which is a huge problem by itself.
Yeah.
The second question I kind of get into, and we'll probably call it this question, but you talked about the importance of it saying it's going to be able to address questions by sort of guiding you and asking you questions and sort of giving a fuller experience than a decision tree, if you will.
Yes.
100% behind something like that, except for the fact that when do you get into this AI, this chatbot, practicing medicine? When does it go from, oh, I'm just going to answer questions that I could have done before by giving you like a package insert and you read it, you understand it. The moment I start explaining it to you, have I gone from promotion to practicing medicine, and where is that line? And how do you think through that?
That's fair. So the dividing line for me, right, in these is, am I dealing with the needs of the patient,
individual? Yeah,
the individual or the doctor, right? So we tend to think of this as much more about behavior change acceleration. So the types of conversations that these concierges are good for is helping you, leverage your motivations to overcome barriers, right? To stage you, to ensure that, you're if you have low self-efficacy, we have to change the messaging to get you to do the thing. So the practice that we're looking at is much more of a cognitive behavioral approach, as opposed to I'm going to start dispensing medical advice.
Right.
And again, those bounds are decided during the design portion of this, where you're talking to the brand, you're talking to their medical team and going, okay, where are the boundaries?
Right.
And then whenever we hit one of those boundaries, as agreed to by the design team, we're going to kick you to somebody that can help you.
And that's a hard question. And I'm not talking about it in the context of behavioral science, because that's a much fuzzier area. I'm talking about something much more regulated, like in the case of pharma, where the rules keep getting fuzzier, especially when you start talking about the combination of treatment versus research, treatment versus advertising, and all of these worlds are starting to meld. I've had clients who were biohackers, who were going to change their DNA, who are going to do research on themselves. And they were going, well, what are the rules? And the truth is, those rules are being created because they don't exist for the most part.
Exactly.
So, anyways, this was, as always, an amazing conversation, Dave. Thank you so much for coming on. Before we go, how can people reach you?
I am at Dave Bulger on Twitter,
Awesome.
until, I guess, Elon throws all the rest of us off. Or dave.bulger at weare2zag, all one word, weare2zag, TUZAG.com.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Darshan Talks. Remember, the information we discuss is for educational purposes only and is not legal advice. For additional valuable insights and updates, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at DarshanTalks.com. Darshan Talks is powered by the